So welcome everybody to a very special, I guess this is called a Zoomcast. Can we call this like a Labournauts Zoomcast rather than a podcast? I think that's what we probably should be called. What do you think, Orion?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Call it whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
For folks that are just listening to the audio file right now, we are actually, this is our first try at doing a podcast on Zoom using some of the tools that are available to us while we are all kind of taking part in this social distancing and staying at home. And today we're very excited to have Mike Schilling from Community Savings, the CEO from Community Savings, and of course our wonderful, illustrious producer in the background, Orion Irvine. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Orion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to give us, I'm sure some people that have listened to the podcast have also either heard you talk at Union Protein Project AGMs or perhaps Labor Council meetings, but do you want to give kind of a short introduction about yourself and the role you play at Community Savings?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carlos. So yeah, Mike Schilling. I'm fairly new to Canada, fairly new to BC. My family and I have been here about 2 years. And for just over a year, I've been President and CEO at Community Savings, which is a job I love. And we're very busy, as you can imagine, at the moment. Hopefully, I think a lot of your listeners will have heard of Community Savings. We are the largest provider of banking services to the union movement, to labour unions and the wider movement here in BC, which I think right now uniquely positions us to really understand the impact that kind of COVID-19 and the ensuing financial crisis has on workers. We've got those links, those grassroots links. So it's a really busy time for us right now at Community Savings, and the team working very hard.
And so I hope you're right. I hope a lot of people do kind of see the connection between labor unions and Community Savings. But where does that kind of come from? I actually did a little bit of research and kind of saw that. So this whole thing started in 1944, correct?
Yeah.
And so what does it look like? Because I think some people might actually be, especially folks that don't know about Community Savings and the link to labor, people might actually be surprised to hear that there is a financial institution that actually works pretty specifically with unions.
Yeah, and I think it's a great story, and one that I researched, obviously, as I was joining the organisation. And 1944 meant we were celebrating our 75th anniversary last year, and we had a lot of things around that. But yeah, basically 10 members of the IWA union back in 1944 decided that it was time that Labour had its own financial institution. You know, banking was a very different world. A lot of working people wouldn't have had access to banking at that time. And these members of the IWA decided that they were going to take it upon themselves and build their own credit union. It's community owned. All of our customers are our members and our owners. And really that ownership structure's there to provide an alternative financial system to the banks, where you have a sort of shareholder bank customer relationship, which doesn't always work to the benefit of the customers. So yeah, and over the years, there's other unions, and I'm going to forget some, apologies, but you know, the operating engineers, the longshoremen, the distillery workers, a lot of these locals started their own credit unions, and over time, these credit unions joined together into what's today Community Savings. So as I said, today, you know, we're a full-service financial institution. You can basically do everything with us that you can do with a bank. We've got the online banking, we've got the digital banking. We do a lot of mortgage lending and credit cards and money advisory. So everything you can get there, but that different ownership structure, we're owned by our community. And for us, that community means that we're still the biggest provider of banking services to labour unions. And through those relationships, we have relationships with over 200,000 unionised families across BC. So that remains really important to us, and it's kind of what drives us and makes us very different, I think, to other options people have.
And so there's 6 branches, is that correct? 6 branches in the province. And so I should have said, so today is the 31st of March. And just, it's important, I think, to give timelines because things are changing every single day. But today, according to the app that I'm on, Canada has 8,505 cases of COVID at the moment. and we're going through a bunch of things. So what, if I'm a member of community savings, or if I'm interested in going into community savings, what do the branches look like today?
Yeah, so we made a decision early on, and we called this early on, that we felt it was really important to keep our doors open of our branches, and the team have really stood up to that, and I couldn't be prouder of the team. Why did we want to do that? Well, it's important that people have got confidence, because a lot of people have got their lifetime savings with us. People need confidence that the credit union that they've built is strong and stable and in a great position. And I'm glad to say we are one of the handful of, there's 41 credit unions across BC. We're in one of the handful of the most stable. We've got one of the strongest balance sheets across there. And that's because our members support us in the good times, and we do the hard work in the good times, that we're in that position now. But it's an important message to get out there. That's why we're deemed as an essential service by the government. We also recognise that some of our most vulnerable members are going to struggle to access banking through online, or even using an ATM or over the phone. So we need to remain open for those vulnerable members. But what we're asking 99% of our members to do is the opposite to what we usually ask them to do. It's don't come in right now. Pick up the phone. The team are here in the branches. We can help. We can do pretty much most things over the phone, or drop us an email. And really, our members are listening to that, and they're hearing that. We're seeing a lot of reduced footfall in the branches, which is great for keeping our team safe and keeping the wider membership safe. And those people who are coming in who really can't access the services in any other way, we're able to stay open and help them. So yeah, open for business, but please don't come in until we're on the other side of this, is the message.
And so I think that opens the door. Before we started, before we hit the record button, we were kind of talking just general conversation, and you mentioned something that I think is important to say, and something with your perspective and kind of your expertise. And you talked about that, yes, this is obviously a health crisis, but it's actually a financial crisis as well. You talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it's a bit of a mantra of mine, that, and I want to be clear, I'm not trying to diminish the health impacts of this, which are obviously severe, and what we all see that. And, a shout out, as we're all doing every day, to the healthcare professionals and people who work in the caring professions, of which a lot of our members are actually, and a lot of the unions that we represent those workers. Huge admiration for them. Not a job I think I've got the courage to do. I'll tell you that. I think those guys showing up is fantastic. But the reality is, this is probably the quickest and deepest financial crisis, global financial crisis, that any of us have experienced in our lives. And we, in so much as the healthcare professions are doing their job, we within the financial services sector need to do our job, and we need to recognise that this very, very quickly put people out of work, put people at risk of not putting food on the table, not paying their rent, etc., etc. And we needed to react quickly as well, and make sure we were doing our part. So it's absolutely not the time for financial services to close their doors and to go home. That's why my team are working as hard as we've ever worked, and we really kind of want to stay here fit and healthy to help everyone out who needs it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because although the health side of this becomes paramount, but as we move through this, I think a lot of folks, as we know, unfortunately, are going to be accessing EI and looking for more supports through our provincial government, our federal government, but then also financial institutions. And it's nice to hear from you that you actually see that the financial institutions in this country, and really around the world, have an actual responsibility to provide supports to their members, but I think just to the public and to folks in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the financial, the world that we live in, the fact is that the financial services sector is so pervasive through everything that we do. It's absolutely critical. And there is a job to do. I'm talking about that. I talk to the team every day about this and say, well, the government, through their sort of monetary and fiscal measures, need to provide benefits. The market that we operate in cannot survive in this scenario. It's an example of market failure, and we've seen governments all over the world, including here in Canada and here in BC, take drastic and previously sort of unthought of measures to make sure that we can support those people who are really struggling at the moment. And that's the role of government. They need to provide benefits. That's not the role of the financial services sector. But we do have a role to play. And I think our ability to act very quickly, we're a we like every other credit union is a grassroots organisation. We're owned and built by our members. We have that sort of intimate relationship with people. We're able to act very quickly to support people and get it out there. And I think some examples of that, and I'm proud to say sort of Community Savings were fast out of the blocks on this in terms of providing loan deferments for loan repayments. So if people were struggling with cash flow in a temporary measure, we can say, well, actually, we can let you keep that for now, and we can defer those payments. That helps some people. We actually went out as well because we realised that it was going to take some time for the government to launch their EI and the other extraordinary benefit packages they had. We went out with an interest-free loan for up to $2,500 because through our relationships with unions and through our relationships with our members, we could see that the job sites had already shut. People were already out of work and rent was due next week. So really, we were very, very quickly able to kind of say, look, we can help you out on this. We can make sure you've not got that cash shortage. And if that was the right thing to do for people, that's what we did.
What would you say to people that simply just don't really have the confidence in financial institutions that they're actually going to not just try to profit off of all of this? I think that's, I think that's probably what a lot of folks are thinking. And I'm sure there are going to be those financial institutions that are going to do that.
Yeah, and we saw from the outset of this, I've said, and it's something that I'm talking to my team about a lot, is when you have a crisis like this, you really see what people are made of. And we saw early on the people who were buying hand sanitizers by the truckload and trying to resell it, right? We saw what those guys were made of. Thankfully, we're seeing what most Canadians and most people in BC are made of, which is stronger stuff than that. And we're seeing the community pulling together. I think the same is going to be said for businesses, right? The reality of the world that we live in is that some people are going to be looking for opportunity here, and some people are going to be looking at what they can do. And again, it just goes back to the ethos of the community savings, but actually all credit unions, I would say. I'm a big supporter of the wider credit union movement. How are we motivated? Well, we're owned by our members, so I really don't have any incentive to take advantage of our members in this sense, because it's a sort of circular argument. The other thing is I'm accountable to a board which is elected by our members, and I'm thinking about my AGM speech next year. And if I stand up and tell everyone how much money we made, I think I'll lose my job. I think that'll be my last AGM speech anyway. This is the year where we tell everyone how we helped and what makes us different. And I'm glad to say that in the easy years, community savings built up such a strength that we can easily afford to pay that back to our members now. The other thing that we've made a commitment is these interest-free line of credits and things like this. Now, people are right to be a little bit cautious and a little bit skeptical. I would always advise that when you're going into a financial product or you're going to work with a new organization. But the guarantee we've made is this is a not-for-profit product. We're not going to make a cent out of this. This is about us paying back. We're a strong financial institution. This is about us paying back to our community, looking at our community, not looking at the bottom line. Not all organizations are going to do that. So I would absolutely exercise caution when you're going to work with a new organization. Make sure they're the people that they say they are.
Do you think, and this is like a really high level question, and this is more your opinion, because I mean, I don't think it's not a black and white answer to this question, but do you think this shifts the kind of thinking that some financial institutions have as to how they work with and how they support the folks that bank with them? Or do you think after this is all said and done, everything just goes back to the way it was?
Well, yeah, I know what I hope in that, right? I do hope that this is going to have a real palpable change and things can't continue on as they would. I think in some aspects maybe that'll come true, and I think in other aspects we'll be disappointed. What I would say, and what's different about this in my opinion to the 2008 financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis was caused by financial institutions. It was caused by a sort of broken system and dishonesty within those systems. And so the reaction of financial institutions and the big banks I'm thinking of really now was a little bit different. I don't often go on record saying this because, as I said, I'm a promoter of the credit union system. That's my job. But I've seen from people I know, people who run businesses, who work with banks. I've seen the banks step up actually in some cases here. I've seen loan deferments come through. I know they've been inundated. But my sense and my hope is that this is not something that any of us have caused. This is a natural disaster in a lot of ways. And I'm hoping that gives more scope for the mainstream banking service system to do the right thing. We need them to, really, and this thing is bigger than any of us individually. We need those guys to step up as well. So whilst I expect that, and it's absolutely what community savings we're always going to do. I've seen some areas of optimism, some reasons for optimism out of the banking sector, and hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, I just I honestly wonder if, like, I think a lot of folks right now, both especially in the financial sector, but I think even for a lot of people that are just trying to work at home, are really realizing the importance of so many jobs in our community, not just to kind of continue to be the driver of our economy, but also, like, I think about daycare workers, people that are working, teachers, like folks that are the day-to-day caregivers for our young people. And now all of a sudden you've got a lot of us that are working from home, trying to do Zoom meetings while trying to take care of children, and then also worrying about health stuff, worrying about the elderly folks that we have in our family, just worrying about this whole thing. And on top of all that, you've got this economic pressure that's coming down because we simply don't have people spending money in the economy. And even if we had money to spend in the economy, with a lot of shutdowns, you don't even have anywhere to spend your money anyways, regardless, right? So it seems like there's a lot of different things going on that I do honestly wonder, high level, are things going to shift after all this is done?
And I think, it won't if nobody sticks around and remembers and pushes this, right? And I think, my mind is already going to the kind of the recovery and the fight back. I think, we're trying to think ahead, and in some senses, it just gives you a bit of a respite from the today, what's going on today. But yeah, I mean, I've been reflecting on that a lot, really, about, I'm pretty passionate about what we do and what the team at Community Savings does here every day. And I think now that passion looks absolutely, well-founded, really, because we are essential workers. But that definition of essential workers has changed, I think, for society. I think people have realized what that is. Obviously, beyond, the healthcare workers that we've talked to, but, every time I go to the supermarket and I'm being served by someone there, they're turning up to work. They'll have their own things going in their lives and doing that. The guys who are picking up the refuse, the guys who are trucking stuff around, the definition of essential worker is, I think, changed for a lot of people, and I think we need to make sure that people remember that. A lot of people listening to this, and you guys, we were brought up with the values about the dignity of labor, right? There's no such thing as a bad job if people turning up and working hard. I think we understand that, and I think that philosophy has just had a real big push, and I think it's at the foremost of people's minds right now. So that's great.
So I have a question for you, Mike. You kind of mentioned a bit about the recovery, and what are some of your thoughts that coming out of this? What do you see the credit union and the co-op movement, like some of the actions they can take, and the union movement as well, to help with the recovery once we're on the other side of this?
Yeah, so there's a huge amount to do, and I think we've got to look at those areas that have been hit hardest. And I think a lot of workers in hospitality sector, obviously in tourism, but there'll be a whole range of them across the piece. I think it'd be great to get that kind of movement about thinking about, okay, how do we make sure, how do we start getting back and supporting these people? We're already seeing it. I heard on the radio this morning there was a station talking about that, about supporting local. And again, the co-op movement, the credit union sector, the labour movement, this isn't new for us, right? We've always talked about supporting local jobs, supporting local economy, and I think we need to get that into overdrive and get a wider section of the community into it. I know a lot of people who work in the travel industry, Canadian travel industry specifically, and I'd love to see people booking staycations. saying, hey, this is the year for us to go and see that place up in, up in the north of BC, or get out to Churchill and go and see those polar bears, or whatever it is, right? Go on a great Canadian holiday and support the local towns and villages that have been really hit hard by this situation. So I think we've all got, we've seen how powerful it is when our consumer choices are taken away from us. And I think if we think about how powerful it is once we get them back, we can kind of make a difference.
I guess a partial follow-up to that question is, I think what we've seen now, especially in the shortage of a lot of the stuff we're depending on, is the domestic manufacturing is, been gutted in this country. So going forward, like, is there any kind of things that the credit unions can do as a movement to say, hey, like, let's look at domestic manufacturing, especially of essential goods? Like, we're running out. We have nurses that don't have the N95 masks. Mm-hmm. And I know it's a lot for a little credit union, but have you had any discussions on the broader Canadian, pan-Canada perspective from financial institutions saying, hey, like, this is something we need to care about, and some discussion around that?
Yeah, I guess, well, it's one of the things that, I guess one of the limitations of credit unions, if you like, is, but I think it's a great advantage, is something I really enjoy about it, is that when you open an account with a credit union, when you put your savings in a credit union, you can be guaranteed that money is going to be reinvested in your local community. It's not going to be invested in, exotic derivative trading in Tokyo, or in, in some mine in, deepest, darkest, wherever. It's the people that we lend to and the businesses that we support are the ones that you can see every day when you're driving to work, or you're dropping your children at daycare, or you're going to the shop. So in some senses, the credit union sector is already really well rooted locally. Pretty much every cent, I'm trying to think of an example of where it's not. Pretty much every cent is lent to businesses and supporting businesses here locally. And I think, as you said, Orion, that I think that's going to be really interesting from manufacturing perspective. We all know what's happened to manufacturing in countries like Canada, in places like BC over the last, maybe 50 years, right? We've seen the trends. I think there's serious questions now about global supply chains and the reliance on global supply chains. And I really do think that organizations are going to look at that again and see some of the advantages that we have in keeping some of that closer to home. It's not going to swing back the full swing, but I think there's really smart ways that we can look at that and say, well, actually, we can build more resilience in this. And where the global system has failed, where do we need to build that resilience? Unfortunately, there's no reason to believe this is the last global pandemic that we're going to live through, right? That's the unfortunate truth, and I think the world needs to learn from this and move up. So I think there's huge, like I said, I am optimistic. I'm optimistic about the fight back, and I think what I've seen from BC, which is obviously the arena that we work in, I think BC will be well placed to do that.
Yeah, I was actually, as you were talking, I was wondering about, specific to manufacturing, if we were to go back a month ago, there's some manufacturing that has been done for a long time overseas that we would just simply say, oh, we can't make that stuff onshore. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, all of a sudden, I wonder if we're going to be saying, no, we actually have to make that here domestically, because it could be essential if this kind of thing ever happens again, which, as you said, it most likely will.
Yeah, exactly. And the definition of essentials broadened, hasn't it? Right. I think when, countries obviously look at huge industries such as steel manufacturing and things like that, and, they protect that in the national interest. I think that the sense of the national interest has got a lot broader, really. And, we need to be able to feed ourselves. We need to be able to bring some of those essential manufactured goods through. And we can't always assume that the shipping lanes are open, right? And kind of thing. So, I'm not suggesting the pendulum's going to swing all the way back, but I think there's definitely more questions to be asked of that in terms of risk planning.
Yeah, I do hope I hope it swings back a little bit. Go ahead, Orion.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, like, we had the Harmac mill, which is a worker-run mill on Vancouver Island out in Nanaimo, that was in bankruptcy quite a few years ago now. I want to say a decade. And now they were able to switch their production to the fiber for the masks. So they're providing the fiber. So there's a good example of, like, a worker-run co-op, basically, that was able to immediately switch their production over, I would say, because it's run by workers. And sometimes workers know how to run stuff a little bit better than the people in the corner office. I don't think you have a corner office there, Mike, so it's good. And then we just saw like a $2 billion announcement from the Canadian government on buying a whole bunch of stuff domestically. So I think it's one of the very small silver lining might be this idea that, hey, wait a second, like we can build stuff here and we can put workers. And then when this happens, and unfortunately, hopefully it'll never happen in a lifetime again, you know, if everything works. But if we do, we have that production here in Canada that we can, at the very least, look after ourselves. And then when the time comes, we can help out other folks around the world. So,
yeah. I think that conversation is definitely going to shift now.
Yeah, I think so. And look, you can see what happens over time economically. People make short-term decisions, and it's often kind of cheaper in the short term to kind of get it off and manufactured elsewhere. But really, we you know what we're seeing now, where we see the failures in the system and where we see the problems, it's due to that short-term decision making. Another example could be in healthcare, right? You know, in the good times, no one hopes this is going to happen, so we don't invest in healthcare as much as we should. We don't have the beds, we don't have the ICU beds, we don't have the ventilators. And now you've seen everyone to kind of scrambling and catch up. And you see those countries that have really strong publicly funded healthcare that's been invested in consistently are just in such a stronger position, right? You know, Germany, I think, is a good example. The UK, where I was a good example of that, but actually over the last 10 years, that's really been decimated, and they're paying the price for that. Obviously, the two-tier system that we're seeing in the UK, in the US, sorry, in terms of healthcare is a real concern. But, you know, not only we see it really starkly in healthcare, but I think you guys are right in manufacturing. We need to move away from that short-term profiteering and kind of think about long-term resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, thank you very much for giving us a whole bunch of your time. We do appreciate it. If folks want to get information about the support that Community Savings can provide, where should they go and find this information?
Yeah, I should have the phone number or something. I'm sure you guys can put it in a link somewhere. I don't have it on the top of my head, but you can visit us online. You can call us. Our team are all working very hard at the moment. We actually gave them a bit of time off because we recognise that we've given them a few hours off because we recognise their lives are a bit harder as well. But yeah, please reach out and talk to one of our team. We're just going to work out what's best for you, what you need right now, and how we can help to do that. And that's our job.
And this is important too for people to know. It's not just for existing Community Savings members, right? Like if you don't belong to a credit union or to Community Savings, it doesn't matter. You can still give a call to your team and ask the questions, etc.
Yeah, absolutely right. We really just want to help, and the name, you know, the clue's in the name about community. We are looking about how we can help our community and not looking at the bottom line right now. It's super easy to do as well. We're not going to make people jump through hoops. We realize there's enough stress going on in people's lives right now. We've got a team who are very good at this, and they're going to get you on the right track straight away.
Great. And we will put some links in the post once we post this. Another thing that I think would be good for folks to check out, if you're looking for some provincial support links, the BC Fed at bcfed.ca actually has some pretty good links on their page. It's super easy to find. And also, if you're looking more on the federal side of things, if you go to canadianlabor.ca, they also have like a workers resource center for any folks that are trying to, at the very least, try to get some more information or at least get links to find more information. Anything else, Mike? Any parting words?
Well, just to say thank you for your time. I think it's great to get the message out there. There's a lot of things changing. People really do need help, and they need valued sources of information. So, you know, thanks for giving me the time on that, and hopefully I'll see you on the other side pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll be seeing each other, I have no doubt. Orion, anything from you, the master producer?
No, just wash your hands and stay inside.
Yeah, wash your hands, stay inside, and then right after you wash your hands, make sure you go and follow the Labournauts at Labournauts on all things social media. If you'd like to find out more about myself, check me out at Say Hi to Carlos. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks, Orion. And I'm sure this won't be the last Zoomcast that the Labournauts are doing, so everybody, please stay tuned. Take care.